There he is.
Hi.
Yes, sorry for the delay.
Okay, I'm just going up on YouTube, so just give me a moment. Thank you.
We ready?
Ready? Yep.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's the Audit Committee meeting Tuesday, June the 10th, 2025. We're starting at 6:10 p.m. First, may I have an approval of the agenda? May I have a mover? Thank you,
Second.
Gloria, and Randy second. I assume that everyone has had the opportunity to read the minutes from the last meeting. May I have a mover to approve? Randy?
Oh, this would be
Second.
this is the last audit committee.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah. No, I'd second it then, yeah. Or-
New
Sandy
business,
can
the
do it.
audit report, financial statements 2024-25. I'd like to introduce Laura Lake. You have the floor, sir.
Heather, did you want to pull those up? I just sent them to you.
Oh, we did? Okay, 1 second.
Yeah.
Stand by.
This must be the document.
Yeah, my computer was crashing. Everything tried to print and it froze, so I had to restart.
Of course it did. That's how this works.
That's the way of the world nowadays.
So it's the draft financial statement that you're looking for, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, I'll just share that.
These will change slightly because these do not have the updated Chester Fire Services Corp 50% in them. I will do that this evening before tomorrow. So.
Okay. I think Zoom's had an update because it's doing weird things anyway. Have we got it?
We got something. Ah, there
Yeah,
it is.
there we go.
Okay.
Can you see that okay?
Yep. So if we just start on page 1 of the independent auditors reports. So the opinion paragraph is the second paragraph. I'm not going to bother to read it, but it is a clean audit opinion. And just note that these will change slightly just because I have to update the numbers for the 50% consolidation of the Chester Fire Services Committee financials. So these are just right now with the Village of Chester. So if we scroll down to the page 4, which is the consolidated statement of financial activities. And it looks a little different this year because essentially the only thing going through here now is the Village of Chester. All the fire stuff has been removed other than the services you provide to the fire committee. So you'll see taxation was like 1.1 million last year. It's only 317,000 this year. Transfers from other governments, that 4256 was just funds for a summer student. The capital grants is accessible funds that were going towards the pool renovations. The management fee and rent is the fees charged to the Chester Fire Services Committee. Interest earned is the money earned on the GICs, and rental income is the EMS and the Eastlink rentals. And then other is just some other miscellaneous income that's come in. Expenses are down quite a bit as well. Ignoring that $1 million that was the donation last year, you still had $1 million in expenses last year. So in the prior year. So this year, your expenses were only $450,000. And on an overall basis, you have a surplus of $99,578. And there's others schedules below that have the details of some of those other numbers. So we'll go over those when we get to those schedules. So next is the statement of financial position. So this is or a balance sheet if you're used to a business statement. So the cash, there's $400,000 in cash on hand at the end of the year versus $808,000 last year. Short-term investments are down significantly because there was $700 and some thousand that was transferred to the fire services. So at the end of this year, there's $345 that relates to the village. The receivable number, that 504, just relates to that amount that's going to be 50% of the fire services. So that's going to adjust slightly once I bring in the current year financials. And then the receivables is high, and that's because there was a $242,000 government grant that came in right at the end of March. So they had a date of March, and so I assume they wanted it shown as 2024, 25. So you'll see that's in receivables. Then you'll also see deferred revenue is also higher down below, just in financial. So that's why those ones are so much higher than the prior years, because there was a large grant that came in right at the end of the year. Under financial liabilities, payables and accruals, just your normal trade payables. The Chester Fire Services Committee one is, so last year that was the full amount that was owed over, and at the end of this year it's down to 83,000. Under government remittances, it's just your normal remittances. And deferred revenue, I just mentioned before, it's the remaining amount from the first tranche of the accessible funds, and then the 242 that just came in right at the end of March. So the non-financial assets is made up of prepaid expenses, which is basically just insurance. The timing of the insurance is October, so there's about half of it is set up as prepaid. Under property and equipment, you had 2.4 million of equipment. The additions in the year were mainly the Lidido pool and a new roof on the EHS building. So the accumulated surplus breaks down. The reserve went up to 350 from 304. Investment capital assets changed by the addition plus the amortization, and the surplus on an operating level was actually a deficit of about 40,000. So before we go to the next page explains the change in the net financial assets. So that's that line right in the middle at 1067863 versus 1055551. So this next schedule is to explain the change in that number. So we start with our surplus of 99,578. There's 149,000 of capital additions, and then $55,000 of amortization, and then 7,000 of prepaids used. So your net financial assets increased by 12,312 and ended at 1,067,000. And what this number kind of represents is if you took all of your current assets less your current liabilities, how much money would be left. So in larger municipalities, often that's a net debt number because they have a lot of debt. So you guys have none. So next is the statement of change in financial position, or a cash flow statement. So we start with our surplus, we add back the non-cash amortization, and then after changes in working capital, 889,000 is used from operations. The GICs were sold in the year, and then new of 938, and then GICs were purchased for 345, and then 149 of capital additions, mainly being the Lidido pool. So your cash decreased by 446,000, and at the end of the year, you had just under 400,000 in the bank. So next is the notes to the financials. They have the accounting policies that the village follows. We can kind of jump to note 2, which is the capital asset schedule. So there were some streetlight upgrades. The machinery equipment is the pool robot cleaner. It was $97.48, and then there's 129,000 in the Lidido pool upgrades. So that's how the 149 breaks down. And yet, so at the end of the year, you have 2.4 million as a net book value on your assets. Note 3 is your accumulated surplus. So this would be like on an operating only basis. So if you look at just operating, we would have had a deficit of 40,831, and you would have your accumulated surplus is 749,555. In investment capital assets, we started with, and I kind of have this split. So there's the first portion is the village, and then I just have what the number is for the Chester below, Chester Fire Services. So we start with 1,528 million. There was 10,000 of contributions from the reserve to pay for assets. 139 came from the accessibility grant, and then 55,000 of amortization. So at the end of the year, we had 1.623 million invested in capital assets. And there's 818, which is your half of the assets that are in the Chester Fire Services. That number is going to change when I consolidate the new numbers for 25. So the next page is note 5 is other matters, which is just the disclosure of the compensation. I don't have the expenses in there, but I'll add those in on the final version. There's only 2 on the site, and I wasn't sure if there's more. And I guess the last two quarters there was none, so that's why they weren't there. So I'll add those in after the meeting's over. And that's pretty much it. So we can jump down to the details of the schedules for the statement of operations, which is page 13. And this just has a bigger breakdown of what makes up the individual expenses of each of those sections. So, and the salary management looks high, but that's because I moved all the wages for admin to be in general government services instead of have the wages related to fire being fire, because essentially your wages are your wages and then you're billing for them, so that the revenue will offset the additional expense. Under the Lido pool, it was right on budget, 80 versus 81, and seasonal was actually under budget. And on the next page, you'll see there's no firefighting at all. That's all done now through the Chester Fire Services Committee. And the very last page is the statement of reserve funds. So at the end of last year, you had about 1.2 million in reserve, and 763 was owed over to the Chester Fire Services. So at the end of this year, you had 28,000 in the building reserve, 194,000 in the Lido pool reserve, and 85,000 in the operating reserve, and 42,000 in the utilities reserve, for a total of 350,670 altogether. Any questions on any parts of the statements?
I had a question at one point, but it went too fast and now I can't remember where it was. Can you just verbalize to me, every once in a while you'll see Chester Fire Services in this report. So I assume that by tomorrow, everything to do with Chester Fire Services will be allocated to the Chester Fire Services Committee, or how does that work? I don't understand that.
Okay, so because the village owns 50% of the Chester Fire Services Committee, 50% of their balance sheet and income statement get added to yours.
Got it. Never mind. I understand now.
Yeah.
So, and actually, the fire services hasn't been approved yet either, which is, we should really have these meetings, like both have them approved before, because I'm consolidating one into the other, and if they make a change, then technically we wouldn't have time to make a change. So
I see.
But where I do both, it's, I'll have both done. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That wasn't clear to me, and now it is. Anybody else?
No, I think it's okay.
Sandra, you're our expert here. Any questions? No.
Because I don't know what's been going on. There was a comment of $1 million donation, or
yeah,
Well,
so
Move money to the fire people.
yeah, so in the previous year, the village donated all of their fire trucks to the Chester Fire Services Commission.
Ah.
And so it was an expense, but then you also own half of it, so then half of the assets come back. So it was kind of like one of those weird things where you donate it to another organization, but you own half of the other organization, so then 50% still gets added back to your records.
Yeah, and the purpose of that is deliberately confuse us all.
The purpose is to join forces with the county so that you guys can use, leverage their ability to borrow to build a new fire department, if that is the will of the commission or the Fire Services Committee and the village. So
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, as soon as you explained that, I understood it, but for some reason, I think that I kind of lost that fact during the discussion, and then it plopped back into the brain.
I think we tend to think of them as entirely separate now.
Yeah, exactly. We
You know,
own
in our
50%
everyday
of it.
lives.
Yeah.
But we own half of it, and you
Yeah.
have to account for that.
Yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of everything has to be done, and that's the last step to pull in 50% of their financials into yours. So
Now, how are you feeling about tomorrow night for the AGM, Lawrence? Are you okay?
I should be okay. My wife is actually having surgery tomorrow, so that was the only touchy thing. But if I have to, I will be on the way home. So
Okay, and would you like to do that like the way we're doing it this evening, or do you want to come in person? You're perfectly welcome to do it by Zoom. It's a long trip.
if I could do it by Zoom, that would be great because it'll save me 2 hours of driving. And
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
where she will be after his surgery's not till 1:30. So
Yeah, no, we're perfectly happy for you to do it Zoom. I'm assuming that there's not going to be any surprises or anything, and that you'll have some paper for Heather to distribute in case there's questions or anything.
yeah, and I'll explain. They'll look exactly the same except for the addition of the Chester Fire Services stuff.
Okay, perfect.
And it looks like you put last year's figures in as placeholders, so it won't be too big of a.
Yeah, I saw that as we were going through.
So,
Yeah, so where it says donated, I actually will add another line that will just say expenses, and then there'll be one. So basically, I'm going to add one line for revenues, one line for expenses,
Okay,
and then on the statement of financial position, it'll be added to the ones that has so cash, GICs, receivables, reserves, and their payables. So and their assets.
okay. I do understand, though, quite frankly, I feel a lot better when I've got it in writing in front of me, but good job. It's very straightforward and,
Yeah.
Lawrence, are you able to make at this time any kind of a general sort of draft opinion on whether we're okay financially or what, or are you allowed to say
we've
anything
got
at
money
this
in the
point?
bank, we're good.
Yeah,
No, but is it well run, basically, and,
Yeah, I think you're okay. You have funds in reserve. The main thing was it would be, and this was a transition year, so there was a bit of challenges with getting all of the money moved. But it did take a lot to reconcile like between the two companies. For me, like I have 30 some entries this year. And that's just because the consultant did post some of the entries for like, because they guys hired to help set up the stage, but he posted some of the village, the committee ones into the village ones. So it messed the numbers up a little.
So that slowed you down a bit then.
at the very beginning of the year before everything was all set up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're not seeing any major red flags at this point, I guess is what I'm trying to
Are
say.
you able to say that we are operating appropriately, I guess is the
That was my
question.
question, really, yeah.
Yeah. You may want to just make sure someone's double checking the bank recs and stuff, just to make sure that they're being done. There was an amount that in there that was like a couple duplicate payments. So I would just make sure that you're double checking the bank recs and
Fire service.
taking a look at your financials when you get them. So,
Okay, I will put that on my to-do list.
Okay, thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Excellent job. We appreciate it. And we will assume that you will be coming in by Zoom tomorrow. Where is he on the agenda, Heather?
He is pretty much up front.
Okay, so our meeting starts at 6:30. If you could make yourself available, you're pretty much first on the agenda.
yeah, I'll be there.
Okay, thank you very much, Lawrence.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Thanks.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Lauren. Okay,
Good.
Yeah, and just to clarify what you were saying at the end there, the bank reconciles for fire got behind,
oh, wasn't
not for the
us?
village.
Yeah, I didn't think so, yeah.
Nevertheless, it doesn't hurt for us to.
Oh,
take that
goodness,
on.
no, I'm just saying that we've always been
Remember, I
fairly
used to
good about,
always put
you
the
always put them in the monthly
reconciliation
meeting
report,
there,
but I
yeah.
stopped because you guys didn't want to see them anymore. but
Well,
put
no,
it
I
back.
mean, that's your.
No,
you can
I
look
think
at
we're
that,
gonna
yeah.
have a discussion about what we do and do not need for our monthly meetings, but that is a discussion for after the AGM.
Sure.
We've got a big night tomorrow, boys and girls.
Yes.
Long night.
Okay, now the next thing on the agenda, and it is necessary, is we understand that our responsibilities as an audit committee. I assume each of you have read the schedule 4.2. Does anybody have any questions? You'll notice that the requirement to attend this meeting under the Municipal Government Act is that we consider ourselves adequately prepared to understand the financial statements.
The exception maybe of Sandy, I don't think that's true.
Well, normally we do have them at least a few days ahead, and it just didn't work out.
But a
this
lot
year.
of it is very esoteric stuff that we don't really, I mean, I can read a balance
Well,
sheet,
you
but-
know, I mean,
Yeah.
I understood every word
Accounting
he said,
especially.
but it's only because I've listened to auditors for 50 years. So
Yeah.
eventually you do get to know the buzzwords, right?
Yeah.
And you do have to, trust that the guy is competent,
Yeah.
obviously, he's got us through the last, 10 years or more.
Yeah,
And there's
And,
only so many accountants that are licensed to.
yeah, apparently
do
it's hard to
this,
Yeah.
find
To
somebody,
do
yeah.
public sector and,
And I just find some of the, what's the word, columns on some of those. I had no idea what the heck he was saying there. I'm sure it was perfectly within accounting principles, but not being an in-depth familiar with such things, I just sort of tend to say with Lawrence, okay, fine, if that's
the
what
one
you
thing that
say.
always throws me about these is the value of your assets. And so for instance, you say your assets are valued at, but you know, bloody well, if you put them on sale, they're not gonna.
Yeah, you
Get
would
that
never be able to
balance.
sell
I
them
always
for
think-
that, yeah.
Why do they do that? But on the other hand, that's the way they do it. So
It's
you're
book
stuck with
value.
it.
Yeah.
So the composition of the committee shall consist of all members of the commission. We're short two, but we've got a quorum. And 2 citizen appointments as voting members, of which one is president, and we thank you.
That's, we've been unable to,
Yes,
track down.
I would have made the last one if I could have, but it was physically impossible.
oh, no, that's fine,
No, that's right, we
Sandy.
were traveling in
No.
bad weather.
We're just glad that you're willing.
Got it.
Yes, we're grateful
Air
that you're
strikes and-
willing to tolerate this.
Yeah, that's imposing on your time, really,
So we have reviewed what the auditor has said. Tomorrow we'll receive written, and Heather will send it to us by email. Okay, so I would welcome it if you would take the time to just have a look at it, because we are the face of the commission. It's going to be on camera and we don't want to look like dodos, okay? And we have reviewed the auditor report, and we have reviewed on an annual basis the adequacy of internal control system established to minimize risk. And we have promised the auditor that we will double check the pay reconciliation. Financial controls and deviations, the auditor feels that we're good. We have a relationship with our auditor over a number of years. We're satisfied with his expertise and his knowledge. And I do not believe that we need to, do we need to make a motion that we accept his report, or is that reserved to the AGM? Heather? Okay. And this policy was last reviewed August the 11th, 2021. Does anyone have any concerns about the policy, or do you
No.
feel it's good? Okay. I will be happy to take a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Gloria.
Perfect.
Yeah,
That's good.
that was
All right.
relatively painless.
Yes.